Hi everyone, I am Lilian Chukura from Lily Legal. We are an immigration law firm and we help our clients get green cards for themselves and their families using the US immigration law system. So today I want to talk to you about the COVID-19 vaccine requirement and the waiver available for it. Okay, so if you have any questions about this or anything else immigration related, feel free to reach out and book a time to speak with me by going to my website, lilylegal.com, or by calling my office at 508-443-1788. So, I decided to make this the topic for today because I just had this come up where um, a potential client was in this situation. They were applying for a green card, and part of that is that you have to do a medical exam. This is whether you are in the US applying for a green card or you are outside of the US going to the embassy applying for a green card. You will have to do a medical exam, and part of that medical exam is now required for you to have the COVID vaccine. So, anyone familiar with the medical exam, they do a full vaccination screening to see what you are vaccinated against and if they need to top up on any of your vaccines, and if they do, they will give you that vaccine at the time. Now, the for basically since October 1st, 2021, it is now a requirement that the COVID vaccine be part of that um, list of vaccinations that is required. Okay, it's not a maybe, it's not if you want. No, it is now required for you to get the COVID vaccine in order to get your green card. And of course, with everything in immigration that has a requirement, there is typically a waiver or exceptions to the rule. And for vaccinations, there are blanket waivers and then there's individual waivers. And depending on your situation, if it's a blanket waiver, then you don't have to do anything, right? If it's an individual waiver, then you have to actually apply for a waiver using the form I-601 and include your supporting evidence. So today I'm going to go over what the blanket waivers are, but we're really going to be diving deep into the waivers that you need to file under the I-601 form, okay? So blanket waiver number one, the vaccination is not age appropriate. For example, a 1 month old is not able to get the COVID vaccine. Therefore, if a 1 month old is applying for a green card to the US, they would not be required to have the COVID vaccine as part of their medical exam requirement. Okay. It is contraindicated due to a medical condition. So if you have a medical condition where maybe you're allergic to the ingredients to the vaccination, and again, this applies to all vaccines, not just COVID-19. So if there's a specific vaccine that's required and you do not and you have a medical condition that makes it impossible for you to get this vaccination, then you have this blanket waiver. The doctor during the medical exam can mark that off for you and basically list it as being contraindicated. Okay. The next one is it is not routinely available where the civil surgeon practices. So this means if you are in a country where the COVID vaccine is not available, right? It's not readily available. You will not be required to get the vaccine. You will have a blanket waiver. So in certain countries, they don't have enough to go around, right? Or it's not even available for them to give it to the whole population. So therefore, you could get the blanket waiver. Again, these are the civil surgeon making this decision that one, whatever vaccine it is not age appropriate, that is contraindicated due to your medical condition, and that it's not routinely available where they practice. The next one, that's a blanket waiver, is limited in supply and will cause significant delay for the applicant to receive the vaccine. So let's say, the person lives in a remote area and there's only like 10 vaccines to a million people, right? So there's only 10 vaccines available, and they would need to wait months and months and months before it's their turn to get the vaccine. That would be significant delay and limited in supply. So this last blanket waiver requires that not only will it cause a significant delay, but it's also the vaccination is limited in supply. Again, this applies to all vaccines. So if there's any vaccine that you are not able to get and it fits into one of these, then there's a blanket waiver. You don't have to worry about it. Now, let's get into the reason you're here, which is the waivers that have nothing to do with everything I just talked about, right? Those are blanket waivers that are automatic if they apply to you. Now, the waiver where USCIS has to make a decision or an immigration judge has to make a decision is the ones that go on Form 601. And that form is you're basically choosing or deciding not to get the vaccine based on your religious beliefs or your moral convictions. And those two things can go hand in hand. Your religious beliefs can inform your moral convictions. So, for example, because you believe in God, Christian God in this situation, and there's places in the Bible where it says not to defile yourself, or that God is the healer, and that informs your moral conviction that because of this that you believe in, this religious belief that you have, that you are morally convicted not to do this, not to get the vaccine. Again, with USCIS and immigration court judges, they are looking at the full picture, right? It's not just that you have a moral objection or religious beliefs against the COVID vaccine, but that you have the same moral objection and religious beliefs against all vaccinations. Okay? All vaccinations. So that's the first requirement. The applicant, you that don't want the vaccination, must be opposed to all vaccinations in any form. That's that's number one. You have to show that you are opposed to all vaccinations, not just, you're opposed to COVID, but you will get the rubella vaccine. Nope. USCIS will not accept that. So, how does that look on when you go to your civil surgeon to do the medical exam? So, that looks like the civil surgeon tells you, hey, you are missing 3 vaccinations plus the COVID vaccine. Would you like to get those vaccinations? You say yes to all 3 of the other ones and no to the COVID vaccine. It will be hard for you to prove that you are opposed to all vaccinations in any form in that situation. Okay? So when they're talking about opposed to all vaccinations, they mean all vaccinations that are required for you to get your green card or to come to the US. So again, number one requirement is that you must be opposed to all vaccinations in any form. You cannot pick and choose between the vaccines, right? And the fact that you have received vaccines in the past does not mean that your waiver will be automatically denied. Okay. So if you had vaccines when you were a child, when your parents were making decisions for you, and now you're an adult and you're choosing not to get any vaccines in any form, that is different from someone that says, oh, I'm going to get all these other vaccines, but not the COVID vaccine. Okay. So that's what they're really looking at there. That's the difference between the two. Okay. If your religious beliefs and moral convictions have changed since you got the previous vaccinations, that is fine. You just have to document it. That's really what it comes down to. Whatever it is, whatever, whenever you did make that change in your religious beliefs or moral convictions, you are still, right? You are still allowed to ask for this waiver. Now, at the end, I will talk to you whether you should apply for the waiver or not, or in what situations you may want to think about it twice. Okay. Now, the second thing is that the objection must be based on religious beliefs or moral conviction. It must be based on religious belief or moral convictions, which means you have to prove this, right? So I've had situations where people, their church, um, told them they should not get the COVID vaccine, right? That's a religious and moral objection. And you have um, what your church is telling you is your, sorry, y'all. As always, we always have a child somewhere during these lives. So, but as I was saying, the religious and beliefs and moral conviction has to be proven. So be ready for questions. Be ready for questions about your religious beliefs when you got the religious beliefs, right? That really matters. And the final requirement is that your religious belief or moral conviction must be sincere. Okay? You're not just saying, "Oh, I believe because I believe in God, I'm not going to get vaccine." Right? That is not enough. Because if the officer or the judge does not actually believe that you hold a sincere belief or moral conviction, they are allowed to deny your case. Okay? So the burden is on you that's asking for the waiver. I'm just going to repeat it. The burden is on you that's asking for the waiver to show that you really believe this. This is your sincere belief. That's what that means. When they say sincere belief, they mean you really believe this. This is part of who you are. And it's not like, you're not going to be changing your mind tomorrow. This is something you sincerely believe and hold to be true. So that is how those are the three requirements for getting the waiver. Okay, I'm going to repeat it. One, you must oppose all vaccinations in any form. That means you cannot pick and choose which vaccinations to get and which ones not to get. The second one is the objection must be based on religious belief or moral conviction. All right. And then the third one is that the religious belief or moral conviction must be sincere. You have to actually believe it. You have to actually hold it to be true. And you're not just saying it so that you can get the waiver. Okay? So it is really important that if you are going to do this, please, please, please do it with a lawyer that knows what this waiver is all about and how to document it. Do not try to do this on your own. If you have got a waiver for your job, just know it's not even a little different. It's a lot different than getting a waiver for immigration purposes. I'm just going to say that. It is a different standard than the ones that your job may have. So keep that in mind. It's a higher standard, actually. And most importantly, it is discretionary, meaning it is up to the officer or the judge to make the decision. It is discretionary. They do not have to approve you. They do not have to approve the waiver. But you need to make sure that your application is so strong that they would not have a choice but to approve your waiver. Okay? So that's the first thing. Now, the evidence. What do you actually need to do this? You need a sworn statement, right? That's number one. You need a sworn statement that details, one, that you oppose all vaccinations. Typically, I have people say, when was the last time you had a vaccination? What was the circumstances in which you had that vaccination? When did you get your religious beliefs and moral conviction? How did you even start having that thought to deny, to reject all vaccinations, right? How long have you had that moral conviction or religious belief? So I'll give you a quick example. I had a client a while back that we had to do this waiver for, and we had to do this waiver in immigration court. Meaning, if this waiver was denied, my client is being deported, right? She's going to be ordered deported if this waiver was denied. With USCIS, you get another chance to reapply. With immigration court, you're kind of stuck with the decision that the judge makes. So you really need to convince the judge to approve the waiver and your green card application all at the same time. Okay? So the client came in on a visa that required her to get the medical exam done. And she had to get vaccinations as part of that visa. Then, while she was in the US, she had to apply for a green card through immigration court. And she, as she has remained in the US, she developed this religious belief and moral conviction that she did not want to take any vaccinations. And she actually detailed it, right? That's where the sworn statement comes in. You detail when you started having this conviction, how it came about, what it actually means in your day-to-day life. Because with immigration court, the judge gets to ask you questions, and the government attorney gets to ask you questions. So it's not just your lawyer that's going to be asking you questions. That's something to keep in mind. If you're going to be applying for this in immigration court, is that multiple people are going to be asking you questions about your beliefs, and you have to be secure in your belief and sincere in your belief that you can answer all those questions. If you're applying with USCIS, you have to have a strong sworn statement and supporting evidence. So, an example of a supporting evidence that we included in this case is evidence that the client's child was not fully vaccinated, and not just COVID vaccine, but all vaccines, right? If you are not vaccinating your child against all the other things out there, not just COVID, the judge is going to have a hard time deciding that you don't hold this sincere belief, even if that came after you came to the US, even if it's a recent change in your belief, right? A recent change in your belief can still get you a waiver but you have to document it. You have to be able to show um, what exactly you object to. So, one, you have to detail what exactly do you object to, right? Is it all medication? Is there a specific reason that you are against vaccinations? You have to detail how your religious belief stops you from taking a vaccination, but doesn't stop you from taking Tylenol, for example, right? Or allergy medication. So if it's you object to um, vaccines or anything injected into you, right? That's different from objecting to um, vaccines alone, right? Saying that you object to all vaccines, but you're not specific about why. They want specifics. They want to know why. Why this vaccine, right? Why do you object to this particular vaccine or all vaccines? So if the reason is that you don't want things that are injected, sorry, y'all, my camera is, y'all, you see, um, that it is injected into you and that you are opposed to it because it is injected directly into your veins, and that is your conviction, that's your moral conviction, that's your religious belief, that's okay. You just have to document it. And that's really the part where people mess up. People, some people will file the waiver, just fill it out. This is what I'm supposed to do. I'm just supposed to fill this out, and just send it in. And they miss the fact that they have to do the sworn statement. They miss the fact that they have to include corroborating evidence. So not only do you say that you have this belief, but if you have other evidence to support that, that would be better. Okay, that will get you closer to having this approved than if all you have is your statement. Can it be approved with just your sworn statement? Yes, of course it can. But it's a harder sell than if you have other evidence. So, for example, of other evidence is if, let's say, I'm just going to use the example of someone that strongly objects to things being injected into their veins, that they went to the hospital and they refused any medication that would be injected into their veins, and they detail that in their statement and then back it up with medical records showing that they did not get any medication through their veins, right? That is what we're talking about here. That's backing up what you're saying with other documentation. So if you have children and you believe that vaccinations are bad, or that you have a strong moral and religious objection to vaccinations, but all your children are fully vaccinated, up to date with their vaccinations, it's going to be hard for an officer or a judge to approve you, right? To actually believe what you're telling them, because you make decisions for your children. And if you really have that moral conviction, it would then translate to your children, because you would not, your conviction should stop you from vaccinating your kids as well. So if you can show that your kids have never been vaccinated, or that they were vaccinated up until the point where you had this change in moral conviction or religious belief, if you can show that, that backs up what you're saying. Okay, so at the end of the day, when it comes to this, it's backing up what you're saying, right? If you are going to be in immigration court applying for this, please, please work with a lawyer. Do not try to do this on your own. Even if you're not in immigration court, do not attempt this on your own, because if this is denied, right? If the waiver is denied and you're in immigration court, you either if you have a nice judge, they'll give you the option to get the waiver, or they're going to report, basically say that you are, the case is closed, you are deported, right? You can be removed from the US. If it's with USCIS, they will deny it. And then if they deny that and you do not send in a medical exam with the vaccination that's required, they will deny your green card application. If you are at the embassy and USCIS denies your waiver application, the same result. Either you do the medical and get the vaccine, or they deny your application. You will then, once they deny your application, you can, if you're in the US, you can ask them to reconsider. If you're at the embassy, you're kind of stuck. You have to start over. If you're in immigration court, you can appeal the decision, but that is just more time and money that you are spending when you could do it right the first time. Okay? So instead of, you know, deciding to do it and just send in basic information, really know to get this waiver, you need to show documentation other than your statement. Okay? That's really important here. That is very important. So, how do you actually ask for the waiver? Right? First, you apply for your green card. If you know from the start that you are not going to get this waiver, that you are not going to get the vaccine that is required by the US government, you can apply for the waiver at the same time as you are applying for the green card. Okay. That's if you're applying in the US. If you are applying outside of the US, you have to go to your medical exam, go to your interview, be denied at your interview or refused at your interview, and the officer will ask you to do the waiver. Then you apply for the waiver, wait for it to be approved. Once it is approved, it's sent to the embassy, and then they can process your green card, right? So there are steps to this. So if you go on the USCIS website, they have a whole step-by-step of how they're supposed to look at this before they decide whether to approve it or not. Okay, so the first step that the officer has to go through is review the evidence for any indication that the applicant possesses the vaccination requirement, opposes the vaccination requirement based on religious or moral conviction. So the first step that the officer has to do is look at your evidence. That's the first step in their manual of what they do when they get these waivers, is look at your evidence, right? And if they do see that you have enough in there, then they can move on to the next ones, right? So if there's any evidence that indicates that you oppose the vaccination, then they can move on to the next stage, right? Then they need to know if you, right, if you oppose the vaccines, right, is the applicant willing to obtain the missing vaccine? So that's what they need to figure out. So they look for evidence. If there's enough evidence, they move on to step 3. If there's not enough evidence, they will either ask for more evidence, or they will do an interview. And at the interview, they will try to figure out why the vaccines were not given, why you oppose it. And then they move on to review the waiver application to determine whether the applicant opposes vaccination in all forms. Okay, first they look at your application, see if there's any evidence in there to tell them that you oppose vaccinations. And if there is, then they look at it to see if you oppose vaccinations in any form. And if they can find that, they move on to step 4, which is review the application to determine whether the applicant opposes the vaccination requirement on account of religious belief or moral conviction. So, like I said, first thing, do you oppose all vaccinations? And then, secondly, do you oppose all vaccinations because of your religious belief or moral conviction? If they say no to either of these questions, if the answer is no to either of these questions, their manual, right? Their manual says the waiver should be denied and the applicant is inadmissible. Okay? The waiver should be denied and the applicant is inadmissible. If they say, oh, they do not oppose all vaccinations in any form, if the answer to that is no, your waiver is denied and you are now inadmissible. If the answer to that is yes, they move on to the next question. Do you oppose it based on your religious beliefs or your moral convictions? If there's not enough evidence in there for them to say yes, they have to deny it. But if there's enough, they move on to the next step, which is they have to analyze whether the waiver application reflects that the applicant's belief is sincere. So does this person truly believe this? Do we have enough in here to actually think that this person believes and has a sincere belief here? If the answer is yes, they move on to the next step. If the answer is no, waiver should be denied and the applicant is inadmissible. But if there is enough to show that you oppose vaccinations in any form, that you oppose vaccinations in any form based on your religious and moral convictions, and that you sincerely hold that belief, then they move on to the final stage, which is to analyze whether the waiver should be granted as a matter of discretion. What does that mean? It means you have met the requirements, right? You have met the 3 requirements that they have on their website. Now the officer has to decide, should we approve this or not? As a matter of discretion means now it's up to the officer to decide if they want to approve it or not. Okay? So, but it also says here, the finding that the applicant holds sincere religious or moral objections should be sufficient for a grant of the waiver. It should be sufficient. But if you get the officer that says, it's not sufficient, then they can still deny the waiver. How do you help the officer decide on that discretion? You show them yourself, right? You show them the reason why they should approve it. Once they find everything else, they should approve it. But secondly, you want to give them more than just the waiver stuff, right? If you have family dependent on you, if you have children, a spouse, you want to put that in there. You want statements from them so that the officer, once they find that you have met the basic requirements, now they can use, when they see the other statements from your family, they will see that this person is deserving of the waiver and approve the waiver. So if the officer in discretion decides that your waiver should be granted, you are granted the waiver. If in their discretion they say that you should not be granted the waiver, your waiver will be denied and you will be deemed inadmissible. That's the process they go through with every single application. Sometimes this process can be 2 minutes, right? Depending on the officer, or the officer will take their time. But you need to document, because remember, the first step is to review the evidence. If there is no evidence for them to review, you're in trouble, okay? Your waiver is already on shaky ground if there is no evidence for them to review. If you just send in a form, you're just sending in a form. They look at the form, They're like, okay, where's the supporting documents? There's no supporting documents. There's no evidence. They can decide, you know what, this person does not qualify. We're going to ask them for more documentation to back this up. And then if you don't send them more documentation to back it up, they can go ahead and deny your case. So that's why it's really important when it comes to this waiver that you know, I want you to know what the officer is required to look at, which is evidence, and make sure that you are presenting them with what they want. Okay, that's my job, right? My job is to know what the officers are required to look at and make sure that we are giving them what they need to look at in order to approve the case. Okay, that's what it's all about. It's really what it's all about. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I know that was a lot. Feel free to watch again. If you're watching on the replay, hi, welcome. Ask me your questions because these are the things that can change your whole green card application. You can go from having a really smooth sailing application to having this come up and having your whole case denied until you go ahead and get the vaccine or you're able to show that the waiver should be granted. So it is really important that if you are going through the step, you are getting the help you need and you are presenting evidence to back up what you're saying. Okay. I'll tell you, for one of my clients, the evidence that made all the difference for the judge was literally her child's vaccination records. That sealed the deal. Was her child's vaccination records that backs up her statements. So she said, we did not vaccinate our child after 1 year because of because of a change in our moral conviction. We were able to present medical records, the vaccination records for the child, showing when the vaccinations stopped, when their last vaccination was, and that was enough to really drive it home for the judge in order for them to approve the waiver and subsequently approve the green card. So it's really important. Evidence, evidence, evidence. If you get nothing else out of this, evidence, evidence, evidence is what's going to get you this waiver approved. Okay. So as I said, if you have any questions about this or anything else, you can book a time to talk to me by going to my website, lilylegal.com, or by calling my office at 508-443-1788. And that is all I have for you today. Oh, I see a question here. So this person is asking, in order to get a green card, do you have to present a certificate? So in order to get a green card, you have to do a medical examination. Part of the medical examination is to see whether you have all the vaccinations that are required by the US government. If you do not have all the vaccinations and you do not have a blanket waiver, you have to apply for a waiver so that you do not have to get this vaccine, right? So basically, you have to do a medical exam. And as long as you have all your vaccinations, the doctor will just sign off on it and you're good to go. If you have a moral objection to any vaccines, the doctor will make a note of it on that medical exam, and then you will have to apply for a waiver so that you don't have to get any of the vaccinations. So it's not a certificate, it's more of the vaccinations. You have to show that you are either vaccinated or you apply for a waiver for the vaccinations. Okay. And when I talked about the vaccination records for the children, is to back up your statement. So every single country that has Oh, that's a great question. Are these medical exams available in any country? Yes. So, any country that has a US embassy that handles immigrant visas to the US, that handles green card applications to the US, has a list of medical physicians that do these medical exams. Okay. So it's not every single doctor in the country that does it. Even in the US, it's not every single doctor in the US that does these exams. They are specifically picked by the embassy. The embassy has a short list of doctors and physicians that can do these exams. And every single country that has a US embassy that handles immigrant visas to the US has a list of these doctors in that country that you can go to. Okay. So I hope that answers that question. Okay. I don't see any other questions. As always, please feel free to ask me questions. I am here to answer your questions. I'm here off every Friday at 12 o'clock to give you information and to answer your questions. So feel free to join me again next week. That is it for today, actually. We went a little longer than usual, but that's because I want to get you as much details as possible. Thank you for your time. And remember, if you like this video, please do hit the like button. If you know anyone who needs to hear this, please share this video with them. And if you are listening in a place that you can subscribe and you want to see all my uploads, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And once again, I am Lilian Chukura. I am the owner of Lily Legal, where we do immigration law and we do it well. Bye for now.